Now, the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, says more than 70% of food exported from Nigeria are rejected abroad. Speaking at the official inauguration of the new NAFDAC office complex at the Murtala Muhammad International Airport in Lagos, Mojisola Adeyeye, the agency's Director General, said the issue was causing a huge financial loss to the exporters and the country at large. However, she said that all the rejection of food exports by other countries may soon become a thing of the past if collaboration between NAFDAC and other government agencies at the ports is strengthened. Adeyeye said along with the port agencies, NAFDAC would ensure goods being exported are of requisite quality and meet the regulatory requirements of the importing countries before they are even packaged. In her own words, over 70% of the products that leave our ports get rejected. Considering the money spent on getting those products out of the country, it is a double loss for both the exporter and the country. Adeyeye stated further that the mandate to safeguard the health of the populace and the quality of imports into a nation like Nigeria, which is overwhelmingly dependent on importation, cannot be actualized without the effective presence of NAFDAC at the ports and land borders. All right, now this morning, joining us in order for us to extemporate on this is the African farmer.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing very fine.
You actually represent the African farmer. You do.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do know that we have a lot of Nigerians abroad.
Yes.
And most Nigerians abroad want to feel at home by eating our food. Sometimes, because of the way our food is, done here or processed or packaged, sometimes before it gets there, it's spoiled.
Yeah.
There was a particular time I heard that about almost 2 or 3 truckload of yam that was taken out of Nigeria and the UK, they refused to let it in.
Yeah.
They said because either they used too much fertilizer or pesticide, I don't know, but they didn't let it in and it stayed there and it got spoiled. And I'm sure this is one, and in many other Nigerian products, being exported that gets rejected. What exactly is the problem? Are we not staying true to what the regulations are concerning what amount of products we should import, we should take out to their countries? What exactly are the requirements needed that we're not fulfilling on our own part?
Well, it's basically that we're not keeping to standards and we're not allowing our systems to work and our processes to function properly. So even the government, the federal government, through the Ministry of Agriculture, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, exported yams. And it got spoiled before it got there. So if the government could export yam and it was rejected, how much more individuals? Because when you look at the, if government as an institution is exporting, you expect that they fulfill all, requirements. So if government yam is rejected, how much more individuals? So systems. And system starts with, when the NAFDAC DG spoke, that's the last mile. There's nothing NAFDAC can do about this. They can only have conversations with other agencies. And until we begin to fund other agencies like NAFDAC and even at power like NAFDAC, we won't be able to export. What do I mean? Now, it starts with the extension agents that work with the farmers, that ensure that the farmers produce in the right way, use the right quality of chemicals that are not banned out there. Ensure that first thing first, when you want to produce anything, is to check your soil. If there are no heavy metals in your soil. So it's not every soil that can grow crops that can be exported. So when you don't do a soil test, and by the way, we don't have soil labs around available to farmers. So when I can say maybe in every state, maybe 1 or 2, and it will be universities. And, and many of the universities' soil labs also are not at par with what you see even in Ghana.
They're outdated.
Yeah, so because I have business exposure across West Africa. So when you go to West African universities, the equipment in their labs, especially for soil, is huge. They are mobile soil kits, so here we don't have that. So you would have to travel hours to get to the university to do your lab test, and if there are so many people, you are waiting endlessly. So before we talk about export, that is crucial. Beyond the soil test to be sure that your soil doesn't have heavy metals, there's another government agency that is more important than NAFDAC. That's the quarantine.
Okay.
The plant quarantine is grossly underfunded when you consider how they used to operate like 30 years ago. They also have that mandate to visit the farms and advise and walk you through the process. It's a relationship, just like the banks. We call them relationship managers. So quarantine is a regulatory agency also that must certify before it gets to NAFDAC. So quarantine does, before they have bikes, they have vehicles, they spend more time in the farms or on the farms. That does not exist again. So they help you, they walk you through the process, they are with you, holding you by the hands, training you, such that those crops don't even leave the farm.
You know, African farmer, I really love what you're saying. You're really educating. When I was in secondary school, there's people you talk about who come to, like you said, the relationship thing, they come to the school because our teachers who, well, let's say the spouses of the teachers who teach, they farm. So they come with their trucks, and I see them doing several testing with all those glass bottles. It was several. So I was wondering, is it an experiment they are doing? Apparently, they needed to export what they were farming. So those guys had to come. But the question is, we have a budget. We have an allocation on the budget for agriculture, which means that these things that you mentioned is part of the budgeting. So why are we lacking the necessary facilities for that lab test? You talk about that. You need to go to a university that is already outdated to get most of the utensils or whatever required to do the lab testing, knowing that it is important, that beyond petrol, agriculture is also another means for generating income in the country.
First thing first, food security is real security. The challenges we are having in the nation is because the insurgency and co is because first, the youths who should be farming or who should be in the value chain of agriculture are redundant. So they are easy tools in the hands of the bad ones. So you see, no matter how big the budget you hear voted for agriculture, it is grossly underfunded. There's a Maputo declaration, I think some 2008 or 2009, some donkey years back, that Nigeria signed to, that 10% of our budget must go into agriculture. Most of the African countries, 10% of the budget. So anytime you see a budget, and that was how many years ago now, to be able to begin to attempt to meet our food security, Rwanda and a couple of other countries signed to it and tried, and did meet up that 10%. And today, they are well off. So we've not been able to budget 10%. And so you see, the quarantine services, the extension agencies, those are fundamental. Without those two, export is not in view. Because export is fundamentally about quality and quantity being consistent over a long period of time. So if you have quality and quantity, so you can have the quantity and not have the quality. It will be rejected. And you can have the quantity and it's vice versa. So the two must be 100% before you get the export order. And the export is not for short term. They don't do export short term. They do export 1 year, 5 years, 6 years, So bottom line is that there's always this fire brigade approach to things around here. Without those institutions, it can't go.
Okay, now let's look at some of the goods, some of the foods that have been rejected. Can you take us through them?
So basically, they are food items, consumables. They are not the cashew. They are not raw materials that will be processed into other byproducts. They are food you cook and you eat. Beans, yams, even tomatoes, vegetables. You see, anything consumable. That you cook for food.
Those are the things
staples.
That were rejected.
Plantain, those are the things that are rejected.
Now we do know that in Nigeria we have there's some insecticides that have been banned that are in use in Nigeria.
Yes.
Why is that so? One of them being chlorpyrifos.
Okay.
Now that contains toxic ingredients that are harmful to humans. From the research I did, harmful to humans, animals, even beneficial insects.
Okay.
Why do we use them? And why is it that the quantity, even if you want to use insecticides, how come the quantity being used is not regulated to the point where even the beneficial insecticides become harmful?
Okay. So this will take a slightly turn into various areas because the truth must be told. Now, NAFDAC is part of the institutions responsible for why we have chemicals in our food. Why? Because most of these importers, almost all the chemicals we use for crop protection, insecticides and co are imported. 100%. None is made in Nigeria as at now.
Okay.
That we use for commercial. NAFDAC has that mandate to regulate that, to ensure that the quality is consistent. Now, what we have in the sector is that the containers have more quality than the content. So when you see something like 0.5 gram, it's actually 0.2 in it.
Oh my.
So bottom line is that NAFDAC needs to take that responsibility. So farmers, instead of using 1 liter that they are used to, they now try it doesn't work, they now load it with 2, increase the quantity.
Okay.
But that is NAFDAC that is solely responsible for that. And we've been crying on this for many years. I've been into agriculture, crop production, 27 years, and I've farmed across this country.
There was a time I saw a video of an individual, I don't want to mention an name or anything, he sprayed this pesticide on beans.
Yes.
It was so much. So I think people now gathered and said, Mr. Man, why so much? So people are going to buy this and consume. And then people will say they have to, because you recall now that there's a system to preparing beans. Just because you want to avoid flatulence, you now have to either boil it the first time, wash it off. And that's again because of the pesticide that they may have been used to preserve it. Now, he mentioned something in his question concerning insects that are actually viable, those healthy ones. But people don't like them because it seems like this. These insects, is weevil one of them?
No. Insects like bees.
Okay.
Bees are responsible for pollination.
All right.
Pollination for every flower is about 2 days, maximum 3 days. If it is not pollinated, there's no fruit to be harvested.
Okay.
So the bees are the biggest pollinators.
Okay.
So when you use some of these insecticides or you use them in wrong volumes, it's in the nectar. So when the bees take the nectar to produce the honey, then they die. Now, let me touch something before I conclude on that. The international politics. There's what is called international food politics. I am trained by the US government on US foreign policy and food security. And you will be amazed about how international food politics plays in local food production. Now, so these chemicals that they say is banned now was used in Europe for 50 years, 60 years.
Okay.
It was good for them until they produced others. Before they produced other chemicals, that was good.
Okay.
Do you get? So they used it. So it's not that, the politics is not that, it's not that it is bad. It's just that through technology, they discovered something new that is better than the old one and they call it bad. There's a chemical called glyphosate. Glyphosate, when you apply it on weeds, the weeds dry or anything, it dries up to the roots. In 7 to 14 days. Now, glyphosate was responsible for the commercialization of food production globally in the developed world. US, Russia, Asia, you could not do commercial farm. That was how they fed themselves. Now, because they've discovered new things, they're now saying that they're now calling it bad. So it's not that it's bad. It's the politics.
But then when we now export, when they check and they see those things in the foods that we brought in, wouldn't that be a reason to reject them?
No, so if you use it in the right quantity,
Okay.
it will not be residual in the food.
Okay.
If you use in the right quantity at the right time. So there are chemicals like insecticides now. They call something re-entry period. There's 3 days re-entry period, meaning pest is affecting your crops and you apply them. It means that 3 days before harvesting, that's the max. There are 7 days, there are 14 days. So, but the 14 days are more potent. So people go and apply 14 days to 3 days or 7 days before harvest. So you now find it mostly on the product, mostly not in the product.
Okay.
So that is where these conversations, start. So, there's a lot of, until we also understand global food politics, which we don't pay attention to. Now, global food, the tomatoes we call Hausa tomatoes. There's nothing like Hausa tomatoes. It is Netherlands tomatoes, France tomatoes, California tomatoes.
Really? They import those
All
ones?
those seeds are imported into Nigeria.
Okay, the seeds.
The seeds, but the northern environment in Nigeria uses premium. Now, so there's a particular seed.
Why is another environment using
The climate is better.
Better,
Yeah,
okay.
but now with technology, there are various varieties that can grow anywhere.
Yeah.
So there's a particular variety called UC82B. UC82B is currently produced mostly from Europe, sold to Nigeria. But for 30 years, it has gone extinct in their market, but they keep producing it for the African market. You will not find it anywhere in Europe. But Europe is producing it for Africa. Now, that is what they used to make ketchup in Europe for 30, 40 years, even 50. Now, because they have more varieties, they will now tell you, if you make ketchup with those varieties, they now tell you that the standard and the quality is low because the sugar, we call something brisk level, is the sugar. So the international food politics is what is being used to kill our produce so that theirs can come in.
So but it's a political thing.
It's a political thing. And until we understand that, around here we'll be saying this. So when you produce ketchup here now, you will hear it doesn't, or paste, you hear it doesn't meet global standards. But the global people ate it for 30 years.
Yes.
And they're still producing it for us. So it's politics. Until Nigeria and policy makers and people in parastatals understand this politics, we will continue to condemn what we produce and match it against them instead of us having policies that work for us. We're over 200 million. We should feed ourselves. India had this policy. One for export, one for local. Even during COVID, the vaccines, some you could not export. You could not take out of those domains. That is politics.
But how do we make foreign exchange then if we don't comply with what the international community is doing?
So it is for us to understand that compliance has to do with us investing in research, investing in, the extension agents, investing in our quarantines, investing in our agencies that make things work. We were doing that before, 40 years ago. That was why we could export. Ensuring that the National Orientation Agency, they've actually almost gone extinct.
They're dormant now.
That's part of their job also. When I was growing up and I was in all these ministries as a young boy, I would just go and say I want information. There were flyers for everything. You could read everything. Now that there's social media, these things should be easier to disseminate. So we need to fund these parastatals. Until we fund these parastatals, export is not in view. But more than that, China did not focus on exports to feed themselves. Exactly. India did not focus on export. Even South Africa during apartheid, everybody focuses first to feed themselves.
Charity beginning at home.
And guess what? We have a leverage now. Brexit has happened. Russia-Ukraine war has disintegrated that European bond. So they need foods from Africa, most especially Nigeria, because all of those European countries have flights coming into Nigeria, going back empty. So we need people in administration now that understands this politics and our leverage and say, come, okay, you want this, let's trade, give us your seeds. We'll produce for you, you'll take it back. They want it now, but Nigeria, we're not having that conversation. Those are the conversations we need now, and I believe this new administration should leverage. But if you don't understand these things, there's no way you can
So
bring
that
it to
are we
the
going
table.
to say that there's an inefficiency when it comes to proactiveness, or could it be that we're not strategic to see opportunities and take advantage of it?
We see the opportunities. I can tell you this. Most of the government staffs are frustrated. They are the best in the world,
Hi.
trained globally. When they are going, even our researchers, they take them on sabbatical and sometimes hijack them and take them there. We don't value process. Anything that is abstract, we don't want. So I can tell you this. Anything we need is on the shelf of many of our research stations. We have research stations focused on yam, cassava, tomato, name the crop, cashew, rubber. They are all functioning. It's just that we need to scale, and it's government that can give them that autonomy. President Obasanjo tried it. When he said, you don't commercialize your innovations, then we're not funding you. So we need the body language of the federal government. But the state governments are very lackadaisical when it comes to they pass the ball to federal. But there's little federal can do. Federal can set a general agenda. It's the state controls the land. So we need the states to be more proactive, to cascade it down to local government. And I'll tell you, once we begin to feed ourselves, we'll be able, because once we keep that standard within, it's easier to now scale it without.
In 2015, something actually transpired. I would say I wish that had continued. When President Muhammadu Buhari said, we will stop importing stuff here. We need to start, making our own food. We talked about mechanized farming. We saw some state governors become proactive in ensuring that the farmers have the mechanisms that will help make farming as easy as possible. Ben Ayade was one of the persons, who actually put his feet on and did that kind of development. We saw rice farms come up. So that means that all the things you talked about, the measurements, the chemicals needed, the research needed for the soil, it became an aggressive thing because investors were afraid. They didn't know precisely what was going to happen in 2015 when President Muhammadu Buhari comes. And so when he came in and he said, no more imports. We need to do our own thing, right? No more heavy reliance on oil. We're going to focus on agriculture. A lot of persons, individuals, businessmen went into agriculture. Way back in Ogun State, farms were being given out for that. What then happened? There was a seizure, I think in 2017, we stopped seeing that vibrance in farming. What happened?
Now, let me take you back a little so you'll be able to appreciate where we are and why we are where we are. Now, after Abacha, we have Abdulsalami. He was heavily involved in agriculture. Then we have President Obasanjo heavily involved in agriculture. Then we had Yaradua. Yaradua was two-time best, as in for 8 years, best governor in agriculture. Then after that, we had Bele Jonathan, who has a master's in fisheries, and we had Dr. Additional work with him. And after that, when President Buhari came in and declared his assets, he said cows and farms. So guess it, since 1999, we've always had a president who was involved in agriculture, and yet we're not food sufficient. It's implementation. They all have good programs, but they don't think of it end to end. A missing component is media.
How, please?
Good. When you see World Bank have a project, 30% of that budget and more is on media to let people know what is happening and how to do things. But here, you think, why do we need to vote a lot of money on media? Do you get education is crucial, and media, mass media. So you don't see that in it. You don't see them bringing all the value chain from logistics, the middlemen. You don't see a lot of all these things. You just see produce. All administrations have been guilty of one thing. They will fund production. They will not invest heavily in processing. And when they want to invest in processing, they are looking for big processors. Meanwhile, Asia, Europe, America is the biggest, but all of them fund small and medium. We can compare Nigeria's economy to Indonesia, Malaysia, India. They fund small and medium. We want
Malaysia
to
has,
fund, we want to fund large.
farther.
So as long as we fund large, we'll never be sustainable because we'll keep importing the equipment. When there's a downturn, something is wrong, we have to wait for them to fabricate. But when it's small, you can buy 2, 3 and, juggle the parts together. So fundamentally, we have been getting it wrong with implementation, not with the ideas. The funds that have been put in this, customs is part of the value chain. All ministers of agriculture have complained about customs since 1999. Of we're funding local and it's still coming in commercially. How is that? So bottom line is that until we negotiate, and that's the truth, you cannot just, come and say, hey, put a stop. We must negotiate. If rice comes in again, I will sack you.
Okay, it has to be like that then.
It has to be like that. But so that means you will look away from other things. So, and because you cannot, we are most of the agencies are understaffed. They're understaffed. Because they're understaffed, it will be porous, but make sure that these 2 products that I'm focusing on becomes your priority.
All right, then. I want to say a very big thank you. I was just thinking, NDLEA said that they have about 80 policemen attached to it. And one would wonder, if NDLEA has 80, how well would they police,
Exactly.
do things and
When it comes
ensure
to security,
that
they're
yes,
undermanned.
they actually undermanned. Oh well, I must say a very big thank you to you, African farmer Mogaji. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for coming. I really did learn a lot. You're really a good teacher because a lot
That's
of
what he is, actually.
yes, and they're actually very interesting.
All right, then, so we'll take a little breather now. When we come back, we're getting to business and entertainment. We'll be looking at the events that happened over the weekend at the AMVCA. All right, one of the things that we'll be touching on this morning. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a bit.